All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 2025 5 Miles from Anywhere meeting. We are an international science society, which just means we meet online, and we always meet at this time, the first Saturday of the month. The only exceptions tend to be June and July, where we usually take a summer hiatus. But for the most part, we're here. All right, for today, we have a couple of things going on with just a few announcements, and then we will have our award-winning author, Tom Burns, talking about the story His Own Hangman, who had a villain, which may have looked very familiar to a number of you. And we'll talk a little bit about that after Tom gives us a little presentation about the story. And we'll, of course, also discuss the story. So we'll have our announcements. Tom will give a little talk, and then we can have a little discussion at the end of the hour. Okay. Okay, I don't have too many announcements today, but of course, as always, I'll open up to the floor after I share my announcements. And if you have something, you can always add it in. So last time for this, but 221 BCon is just around the corner. April I don't know. I said April 15th, 11th, 13th, but it's coming up, and hopefully you all can make it. And I believe it is April 11th through 13th.
Yeah,
Um,
it's on Passover. Yeah.
okay, and Belanger Books is sponsoring it this year, and we will have a table. I will not be present. I couldn't get off work for it. But my brother Brian will be there. So and he's going to do a couple of the panels. So if you are there, make sure you stop by, say hello, and let him know that you're a member of 5 Miles. We always like to meet our members. All right. Ray Rathmeyer wanted me to share that he's got a Kickstarter right now. I don't usually share our Kickstarters on these meetings, but he did ask me to. Called 5 Minute Mysteries. He edited it by Kel Richards, and it's 40 short little 5 minute Sherlock Holmes. You solve it, 5 minute Sherlock Holmes mysteries. The book's a lot of fun. So if you're interested, give it a try. And the Kickstarter is going for another, I think, 2 weeks. And then lastly, the only last announcement I have is I started a new Facebook group because there is no group for the Prod Street Irregulars and the Solar Pond Society of London. So I thought I would combine the two into one Facebook group. And I know Facebook groups are kind of out of style, but it would be a way for us just to keep connecting with the larger group. And as you know, we always do a virtual meeting in February for the Solar Ponds Societies, and you are all welcome to attend. There's talks there, and we say our new investitures for the year. So I'll send an email out, a follow-up from today, and to the group. And if you're interested in joining the Facebook group, you can just click on it. You can join it. It's open to everyone. Okay. Now I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute to see if anybody else has any announcements for the group today. Anybody have anything? If you do, just shout out or do the hand raise. Oh, Shayna?
So next month is the spring luncheon of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I believe it is Saturday, the 17th. I know that the official invitation has gone out. If you have not received one and are interested in attending, I think if you go to ash-nyc.com, they'll have a link where you can find out like who to contact in order to get that information. And
Excellent.
for those who have been there before, we are once again going to be at the Tony DiNapoli's on Third Avenue.
Excellent. Very cool. And are pretty much do that RSVP to you?
Oh no,
Okay.
I don't run that one.
Okay. You run so many things. So, okay. Excellent. All right. Any other announcements for the good of the cause? All right, Tom. Let me just introduce you and then you will be on, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Let me just go back to my screen here. All right. So I could say so much about Tom. All right. So Tom Burns writes from the small town of Wendell, North Carolina, where he lives with his wife, Terry, 4 cats, and a Vizsla. His work includes the Natalie McMaster's Mysteries, a dark, sexy thriller series. And that is an award-winning series, by the way, people. The Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson series, pastiches in the style of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The Legacy of the Unborn, a novel of Lovecraftian horror he wrote as Silas K. Henderson, which is a direct sequel to Lovecraft's Of the Mountains of Madness. And he also writes the 3M Detective Agency stories. Tom was born and grew up in New Jersey, attended Xavier High School in Manhattan, earned BS degrees in zoology and microbiology at Michigan State University, and an MS in microbiology at North Carolina State. As a kid, he started reading boys' mystery series such as The Hardy Boys, Ken Holt, and Rick Brandt, then graduated to the classics by authors such as Arthur Conan Doyle, Dorothy Sayers, John Dixon Carr, Earl Stanley Gardner, and Rex Stout, to name a few. He has written fiction as a hobby all his life, beginning with The Man from U.N.C.L.E., stories and marble-back copybooks in grade school. Tom built a career as a technical, science, and medical writer and editor for nearly 30 years in industry and government. He is currently a full-time novelist. Good for you, man. And an active status member of the Mystery Writers of America. His home story, The Camberwell Poisoner, which we did discuss in a previous 5 Miles meeting, appeared in the March-June issue of The Strand magazine in 2021. And many of his other home stories have been published by MX Books and Belanger Books. The 6th book in the Natalie McMaster's Mysteries Killers was released in September 2021 and won the Silver Falcon Award for Best Action Venture Book of 2021. That was a good year for you, man. The Strand and the award. The 7th Natalie McMaster's Mystery Sister was published on December 5th, 2022, and was chosen as a finalist for the Silver Falcon Award in 2023. Tom's Sherlock Holmes books include 10 Steps from Baker Street, released in March 2023, and A Peek into Watson's Dispatch Box, released in May 2024. The story we are reading today and discussing, His Own Hangman, was published in that volume. Tom's latest book is To Keep Her Honor Clean, a 3M Detective Agency novel released on December 20th, 2024. All right, let's give a virtual round of applause to Tom while I get his PowerPoint set up.
Sure.
All right. Here we are.
That's on the couch there. Didn't have the two loaf sheet.
Okay. And hold on, guys. Slideshow.
Yes, slideshow.
All right. All right, and let me shut myself up here, and Tom has the floor.
Okay, and I'll let you look at the picture and then go to the first slide, Derek. Or the second slide. Okay, so the story is set slightly after the Speckled Band, which is mentioned at the beginning of the story. And it was inspired by an article in the Illustrated Police News Saturday on May 5th, 1883, which is the picture that you saw on the cover of the PowerPoint about an inmate suicide in a jail in San Francisco. I often do things like this, as I will read newspapers from the period, and then, you know, of course, my story has nothing to do with San Francisco or all of that. But, you know, I will read a story like that and then do a what if Sherlock Holmes was involved. And so I translated it to London, to Newgate, and we were off to the races. Next slide, please. The story involves, in part, the theft of a statue called Kuan Yin, and she is the female aspect of the male Bodhisattva. I can't even say that next word. Avaklokavishara, and she symbolizes compassion, acting as a patron of those in need. It's a very famous image in Buddhist iconography, and has been made into countless statues and other art forms in various media. And the one in the story, of course, is a very old jade statue that would probably look somewhat like the one I've got pictured here. Next slide, please. So Watson and Holmes see the story in the newspaper about suicide, supposed suicide, and that piques Holmes's interest enough to go over to the St. Bart's mortuary where the body would be. St. Bartholomew's has a real particular place in the canon. Of course, it's where Holmes and Watson met. I believe Watson worked there for a while part-time when he was getting on his feet as a doctor. Um, it was founded, and I didn't know this, in 1140. That hospital has been in London. And the mortuary was in the basement, and Holmes was there a lot, beating corpses with sticks to find out how long one was able to bruise a body after death, which I think is you can't, but whatever. Next slide. And the action moves to Newgate Prison at the Old Bailey and Newgate Street, which was an infamous place in London. London's gallows were relocated from Tyburn, which I guess was a street corner or a square, to Newgate in 1783. London used to conduct public hangings, I guess, to instruct the people on what happened to criminals. However, they turned into essentially street fairs. Everybody came out to see the guy get hanged. So they finally stopped doing that in 1868. And the process that I've described in the story was the actual process they used for a hanging inside the prison, where they essentially cloistered off the unlucky inmate on death row for a while before the hanging, and then brought him out to do the deed. I thought it was particularly scary. You know, it just showed the attitude at that time that you know, these people were considered you know, not fit to be in society, and they were treated as such. Next slide, please. So, you know, if you read the story, that Sam Lee, the houseboy, stole the statue from his master and killed his master in the theft. None of that was any part of a mystery. And he disappeared into Limehouse with the statue. Limehouse is mentioned in a number of the Holmes stories. It's a maritime district in East London. They built a basin there where they could bring the ships in off the Thames into a secure harbor, and it became a major shipping area. And London's Chinatown was located there, mostly, I guess, because it was the point of arrival of a lot of ships from China and India and other places in the East. So it was a real melange of races and neighborhoods. It was a perfect place for Sam Lee to flee after stealing the Kuan Yin, because if he had stayed there, he probably would have been very difficult to apprehend. But of course he didn't, and he got caught. Next slide, please. And then the story features later on the Egyptian cobra, a relatively small species of spitting cobra, but one of the most venomous snakes of northern Africa, which is saying something. Cobras have a neurotoxic venom, which causes respiratory paralysis. And it was interesting that there would be two stories, Speckled Band and this one, occurring so close together where snakes were involved. Next slide. And finally, we come to the villain of the piece. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the yellow peril, which is a term, it's actually a racist term that was used throughout Victorian times and into the 20s. People were xenophobic, and China and the Far East were not very well known. And people were afraid. They knew that there were all of these people who lived there. And, well, what if all of these Chinese suddenly decided to descend on England and rape and pillage and I guess this was a real fear for a lot of people. Sax Rohmer's Dr. Fu Manchu stories, which was written in the 1920s, sort of went right along with this fear. Fu was this inscrutable, evil person who was mainly concerned with, I guess the best way to put it is countering threats by the West to China. So in most of the Fu Manchu stories, his motivation is to stop someone from exploiting China, going into China. And this story fits right in with that because the Kuan Yin was acquired from China. And the first Fu Manchu story appeared in 1912, and the character was very popular. Continued into the 1970s. Now, of course, in my story, he's not Fu Manchu, he's the doctor, because Fu Manchu is a copyrighted character, and I would not take a copyrighted character and put him in one of my stories. And plus, the Fu Manchu in 1912, as Derek pointed out, would be a different person than the person in my story in 1883. Now, if immortality serums were involved or something like that, I don't know. But we've never had any inkling of that. So I think it's safe to say that it might have been a relative or another Mandarin who looked similar in dress and in affect. Next slide, please. And Sherlock Holmes and Fu Manchu have intersected in pastiches. The most famous one is Kay Van Ash's 10 Years Beyond Baker Street. If you have not read that book, read it. It is very, very good. It's an action-adventure story, pure and simple. Kay Van Ash did get make an arrangement with the Sax Rohmer estate to write the story. So this is Fu Manchu for sure. And if you're a fan of Rohmer stories, you will love 10 Years Beyond Baker Street. Next slide, please. And so when Holmes and the doctor meet, they have a discussion about why the doctor has done what he is doing. And his point is simply he's getting his property back or China's property back, which he feels was stolen, basically, from China. And he refers to the Opium Wars. And this is a fairly sordid story. But when England first establish trade with China, and it was mainly in the tea trade. They wanted to buy tea, and China insisted on payment for their tea in silver. And of course, England consumed a lot of tea, so a lot of silver was spent. But the problem is they couldn't get anything reciprocal from China. I think this is very interesting too, with all of this stuff right now about China and tariffs, and and this is what, 2025. It's an old story, folks, because here it is. China would not pay England silver back. So basically, the British supply of silver was being depleted because they were paying for it in tea. So what do? Well, if you don't have very many scruples, you start to sell opium to the Chinese, and they become addicted to it. And then if they want more opium, well, guess what they have to do? They have to pay silver for it. And it it wasn't as much of a thing between governments as it was a thing between individuals, because a lot of the Mandarins, or I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the Mandarins became addicted to opium. They wanted to supply. England supplied it, but give us silver. Um, and The Chinese sought to outlaw opium. I wonder why. Uh, and the British responded by declaring war and landed troops in China. And there were two opium wars, one in 1839 and again in 1856, both of which England won because the British troops were so much better trained than the Chinese. They had better weapons. Um, so China was forced to make economic and territorial concessions. Um, and again, if you know your history, this kind of thing wasn't uncommon. It wasn't limited to China and England. In European exploration was a story of exploitation of the places that they went to. Sometimes it was direct conquest. A lot of times, what started the American Revolution, it was just the English insisting on, taking goods from their colonies and not returning very much at all. Um, so, just pages of the same story. The British gained sovereignty over Hong Kong in the as a result of the Second Opium War, and that, of course, lasted until what was it, the 90s, when Hong Kong was finally ceded back to China. Next slide, Derek. So the doctor, anyway, felt like he had a really good case for coming back to England to get his property, and he and Holmes have a little argument over the various positions in the story. The other reason I put this in the story was I didn't want to perpetuate the racist attitude, but I also want to be true to the times. And the times were that attitude was there. But I guess what I wanted to do was show you both sides of the story. So, the English and Holmes's position was that the collector obtained the Kuan Yin in the proper manner. He paid for it, for his collection. He was an ethical person, according to Holmes. But, Fu Manchu, or the doctor's position, was that there was no ethical way for England to obtain that statue because it wasn't theirs. It was the property of the Chinese people. And of course, at the end of the story, Holmes decries, the prevalence of class and race and all of these things that tend to divide people rather than bring them together. And one of the things that can bring people together is art. And, it's not going to bring you together if you don't see it. And that's not to say that in this day and age, if you have the means, you can travel to these other countries and see their art. And you know that even to this day, there is controversy about, for example, archaeology, where archaeologists go to other countries, they do digs, they find these artifacts, and no longer do they come back to the United States to sit in museums here. They are usually kept in the country where they're found to sit in museums there. So, and of course, I can't let this go without talking a little bit about solar ponds, because I used August Derleth's strategy of referring to the doctor, who may or may not be Fu Manchu, just as he, Solar Ponds may or may not be an incarnation of Sherlock Holmes. He wrote 3 stories about the doctor, which I have listed here. And Basil Copper also wrote a story about the doctor, because, again, that character was very famous for most of the 20th century. There were these stories, there were movies. And I don't have it in here, but that picture I showed you in the previous slide was Christopher Lee playing Fu Manchu. Well, Christopher Lee also played Sherlock Holmes. So that's another connection that to be aware of. I think that's the last one, isn't it, Derek? You're muted, guy. There we go.
There we go. Yes, it was the last slide.
Okay, so, what I tried to do in this talk is just a version of the annotated Sherlock Holmes, and annotate some things in the story I thought might need some further explanation. But of course, if you have questions about anything else and I'm able to tell you, I would be more than happy to do that.
All right.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you for the talk, Tom. We'll give you another virtual round of applause. And then I'd like to, of course, open the floor for questions. I have quite a few questions myself, but I always like to see if others do. So if you want, you just start talking or use the hand raise feature, and I will open the floor up for questions for Tom. Oh, Shayna's got one.
Hi, Tom. I was wondering, are you familiar with a movie from the 1940s called Three Strangers?
No, I'm not.
That's what popped into my head when I first saw the reference to Kuan Yin, because the statuette of the goddess is central to that movie. It basically stars Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet, and I'm forgetting the name of the lead actress, but basically this woman picks up 2 strangers because she's going to she's got this whole thing about Kuan Yin. She's got to figure the goddess, and she wants to make a wish. And apparently the ritual is you need to have 3 people who don't know each other, and they all make a wish to the goddess at midnight. And so they decide, okay, we're all going to wish for money because money can solve, the problems that each of us have. And so they wind up splitting like an Irish sweepstakes ticket. And then, the horse that their ticket is for gets picked to run in the race. And then, complications ensue. I highly recommend it. It shows up on Turner Classic Movies every once in a while. But I think for a lot of people, that might be like where they might encounter the figure of Kuan Yin, because apparently there was a group of set decorators in Hollywood in the 1940s kind of made a game of putting this goddess statuette on sets whenever they could get away with it.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I love Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet, and I will look. Three Strangers. I will look that up.
Apparently, it was meant to be like a team up of the same actors from The Maltese Falcon, but not obviously Humphrey Bogart couldn't make it. So Peter Lorre is actually playing what was meant to be the Humphrey Bogart role, which is interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean Kuan Yin is all over everywhere.
Mm.
It is a very famous and ubiquitous image in the Orient, in many countries.
Hmm.
All
Larry?
right. All right.
Okay. Hi. So I just wanted to say that, I enjoyed this recently with the Solar Ponds group. We did one of those three stories. I don't even remember which one it was. And had a long talk about Fu Manchu and his place in society, and the fact that he's basically he's considered to be the way you handle it, because he himself, the character himself, is considered to be racist. So, which is why you'll never see a Fu Manchu movie in America anymore. And, the last one with was a sort of comedy with uh, what's the famous that actor? I forget.
Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers. That's right. And there were always protests for it, and so you won't be. You don't see that again. And so the way in which you don't make it, the way you counter that racist aspect is you kind of do it from, Fu Manchu had a point in your story, which I think is very clever to show Fu Manchu for once, on the side of good in a way, or fairness, and of course Britain on the other side, which is the way we understand it better today, for a lot of these things. But I congratulate you in giving us
Thank you.
the least racist Fu Manchu story I've ever read. And it was,
Or
I
you can
suppose.
look at it as the most racist Fu Manchu story, because I think what Holmes was saying at the end of it is that, both races were stating their own position, and that was the source of the conflict.
Hmm.
Nowadays, I suppose that what might be done as an equitable solution, like was done with Michelangelo's Pieta, it toured the world.
Right.
And, people in every country could go see it in their country if you didn't have the means to travel to China. But Holmes was saying it was wrong to take something like the Kuan Yin and keep it closeted up for yourself.
Right. And the
And
Chinese aren't the only ones
oh
with
yeah, no,
against
absolutely not.
against British,
Mm-hmm.
against the British. But it's interesting. But the again, you won't see it much in popular culture, Fu Manchu. So whenever we get one, I kind of take a little extra enjoyment. It's sort of because we those of us that are Solar Ponds and Sherlock Holmes fans, we like to sometimes just look at things the way they looked at them in those days. And but
Well, and I feel
also,
like as a historical writer, which is what you really are, if you're writing Sherlock Holmes pastiches, you are a historical writer. That it's sort of a duty to reflect the times as they were, not the way we would want them to be.
right. But also, though, not to. That's true. So it would, to say that the British didn't have a lot of racist phobias about the Chinese would be wrong, because they do. But to depict though as justified
Right.
today is not something you'd want to do. And you step around that neatly, at least in this piece, as to see him as a hero trying to restore, because that's all he wanted. He just wanted old China back. I think Fu Manchu. So.
And then if he had to use a little spitting cobra venom on policemen to get it, well,
Right. Yeah, he didn't.
okay.
He didn't care. He didn't care how he did it. That's right. That's right. So congratulations, Tom. Nice story. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right, I've got a question, and I'm actually glad David's on too, because David's also used the Fu Manchu character in some of his Solar Ponds stories, and you put a comment in about several other authors who still use the character or have written the character. And I guess my question, just like when I write Solar Ponds, and I'm certainly not as extensive in my writing as David is. I purposely avoided using the character just because of the race issue, and yet, I mean, the character is still very popular, right? I mean, there are still, I believe, new Fu Manchu stories written. And I would just kind of, I guess the question is, why still use the character? And that kind of ties in with what Larry said. I mean, people love the character, and they
He's
still
a great
find
villain.
it fascinating.
You got to
You
love
know?
a great villain.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Tom and David, if you want to jump in too, like why use the character still is my question.
Because he's historical and he's iconic. And I think, and I mean, I'm unabashedly a pulp fan. A lot of, I've been accused in all of my writings of being pulpy, and I take that as a badge of honor rather than as any kind of discouragement. I did send the story to the Strand, by the way, and they turned it down. And I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't because of the point you just brought up.
Right.
But, I don't think we're going to solve these issues by ignoring them. People are racist. That is a fact. And I think that racism is no good no matter who the racist is. And, that's what I really see as the heart of this story is the discussion between Holmes and Fu Manchu about the various positions that they have on the issue. Where Holmes is true to his British heritage, taking the position that what I forget my own character's name, Hadley, was doing a service by assembling this collection of Chinese iconography, so the world could see it. Where Fu was taking the position that you are stealing our art for yourself. And, these are the kinds of things that cause conflicts. And I don't think we shy away. I don't think we solve the conflicts by shying away from them and pretend they don't exist. So that's, for me, a good reason. I wrote another story. I think it's the Addleton tragedy that's also in Dispatch Box about a woman who has a black slave that she brought to England when she fled from America after the Civil War. And that story, she's racist. She feels like she owns that man, even though it's not legal in England and there is a bond between them. And, a lot of people sort of cringe when they read that story. However, it's true to the times. And that's why I write this sort of thing. It makes people think about things that maybe you might not want to think about, but you should. Is that not the job of an author?
All right, David, did you want to say anything too?
I was just going to say that when I included Fu Manchu in the Solar Pond stories, it was just more because the original stories had Fu Manchu in them, and I felt like I needed to write a story that where he was represented in at least one of the stories. So when I was writing my first collection, I kind of thought of a plot that would use him, and then when I was writing my second Ponds collection, I thought of a way to work him in. I didn't really use him in like a Chinese way or a racial way. It's just he's another crime boss that has a certain part of London that he controls, just like the mafia might control one part, or Professor Moriarty controlled his certain aspects. Fu Manchu is just over another part of London. So when they would go to Limehouse, it's kind of like you were entering Fu Manchu's territory more than like a Chinese, aspect or anything like that.
All right. Sarah, by the way, I love your shirt, Sarah. And
Thank you.
Shayna, we'll come after Sarah. Okay, Sarah.
I just wanted to apologize because I didn't read your story before this meeting, but I definitely will. It's just been really chaotic, like rain for days and our basement flooded and whatnot. But I absolutely love the idea what you've done here. I love the character Fu Manchu. The books are so fun. I'm also a huge pulp and dime novel fan, and the books are. I mean, I was as soon as I read it, I was like, this is like a super racist, very absurd version of Holmes and Watson, you know. And I think that there's definitely, in my opinion, like room for what you're doing because it's almost like a remediation of that sort of attitude in a very creative way. And I have a project of my own that I started calling the Library of Amazonia, where I've gone in and started to build a collection of annotated versions of some of these pulp books. And Fu Manchu is one of the ones I did where I just annotated, I color coded everything to talk about the misogyny, the especially the Asian misogyny in that, some of the racism in it, the historical context and things like that. Because I think that what you're doing is kind of similar to what I was doing, is like trying to educate people in a creative way and like reclaim those stories and everything and use them, because I don't believe in banning books, but some of them are truly awful. I mean, I'm reading a book about T.E. Lawrence right now that is just like sometimes I have to put it down and like walk away. But I think that if we can reclaim them by using them to educate people, like you're doing, you know, like you brought in with all the yellow peril stuff and the way that you stuck to Holmes's attitude from the time, and it's important to keep those things historical. I think, like what you were saying. And so I just really love hearing everything that you do. I can't wait to read your stories. I think it's a really worthwhile project. I think it's a cool way to reclaim it to work in Sherlock Holmes, which of course, you know, whatever, my special interest, and that's why we're all here. So anyway, I love what you're doing, and this is my first meeting. So hi everybody. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you very much.
All right. And Sarah, I'd love to see some of your annotations at some point. That's really cool that you're doing that.
I can email them to you. I actually lost Fu Manchu. This is like a huge thing. I did it twice and then lost the file, so I have to do it a third time. But I'll email you some other links, some PDFs, and then you can like pass them on if you want. So
That's cool. No, that's great. Shayna.
Oh, I'm a fan. Oops. Let me lower it. I'm a fan of the original Fu Manchu stories, and I mean, he's just such a stylish villain. I mean, there's a, he's kind of the template for the James Bond villain. You know, because you read these stories and like there are all these trap doors, and you know, our heroes investigate seemingly deserted warehouses, and then they find these gorgeously decorated audience rooms, and there's Fu Manchu sitting on a throne on a dais. You know, and he's got no laboratories, and he's got like mind control serums, and it's just, you know, full points for style, frankly.
Yeah, I mean that's how I feel. You know, it's I don't know what else to say. I'm not a racist. I don't like racism, but you know, is it any worse than writing stories where people are dismembered? And my Natalie McMaster's books are, you know, pretty graphic. Um, and I don't know why they are as dark as they are. It's just something that came out, and you know, it is what it is. But I don't see that kind of thing as any better or worse, you know, than somebody who's murdering because he doesn't like a particular race, or he doesn't like women, or he doesn't like somebody from some political party. You know, it's all bad. It's all evil. Don't do it. Um, and that's why we need people like Sherlock Holmes, because that's what he stands against, is people who do that stuff. Um, so, you know, I'm not trying to change the world here. I'm trying to entertain people. But if I make you think a little bit about maybe some concepts that you either haven't or don't really want to address, maybe I've done you a service. Maybe not.
Switching gears a little bit, Tom. I am curious to know why you set this story so early, because you set it pretty soon after Speckled Band. So Holmes and Watson have only been together for a couple of years. I don't even know if it's been full. It probably wouldn't even been 2 full years at the time of your story, or maybe
Truth,
about 2 full years. Yeah. So I was just wondering why you made it an early one.
truth is probably because the newspaper article was from 1883.
Oh, okay.
So, which had nothing to do with anything. I could have said it at any time, but since the newspaper article was 1883, I just, I looked and saw that would be right after the speckled ban. Oh, snakes. Um, and by this time, poor Watson must be what's the word for fear of snakes? Anyway, I don't think he wants.
Herpophobia, maybe?
Say what?
Herpophobia? I might be getting
Herp is a reptile, but
okay.
anyway, you get my drift. Watson probably doesn't want to see any more snakes for a while after the speckled ban and this.
Oh,
Oh, Larry's got a question, and I've
I
got
just,
one for you.
I'm sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but which is one of my problems at these meetings. But I just want to second that, I love Pulp Fiction. I'm a big fan of The Shadow. Derek knows all the old Shadow pulps, and they also contain a lot of racism against Chinese. Though he usually does Chinatown in Manhattan, with
Mhm.
Shadow, with everything is very Chinatown in Manhattan. And he used to have a woman who used to disguise herself as a Chinese woman. That was her. So because he could actually have a Chinese agent, you see, because that would make him not a good person, the Shadow. So he had a woman whose specialty was to dress up and disguise herself as a Chinese woman so she could infiltrate the Chinese underground and see. I do love that whole flavor of that time. It is, though it is racist, and so it's a tough thing to deal with.
Well, and that yellow peril thing apparently was a real deal at that time. My background is Irish, and I had enough stories from my family to know about the I don't know if you call it racism or what, but Irish immigrants weren't treated any better then than Mexicans are now. My aunt
Right.
told they used to call them crossbacks because they were Catholic.
Sure.
The signs, no Irish need apply, and on and on. So, I mean, each era has their own scapegoats, and the Yellow Pearl was a big deal. It's also in Doc Savage.
Sure.
And
Because it was a flavor of the times of Pulp Fiction. It was it was like you say, the James Bond of its time.
And another thing too is that groups that don't assimilate tend to spark this kind of thing in various countries. The Chinese didn't assimilate. They have their own traditions. They have Chinatown. They, live as Chinese in other countries. And people look askance at that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's what is.
Well, it separates people.
Yeah, it does. And then if people feed it, it makes it worse.
Yeah, and that's intentional. I mean, that's why Jews are always in trouble, and but their eating customs
They
uh,
didn't. They
make
didn't.
are designed so that no one will eat with them.
They
Except
didn't assimilate either.
right.
It just comes back to the same thing.
Right.
If you want to assimilate into the society you're in, people will generally let you. But if you don't, then they feel slighted.
I want to give Max a chance to get in with a question.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, and I'm sorry I showed up late, but I did want to say that I think that your discussion of racism and racism in Victorian times in particular is something that our Scion typically touches on almost every time we read a Sherlock Holmes story. It's about the portrayal of other people and other races really from a point of ignorance. And what you said is true, that when there are groups that don't assimilate, then the stereotypes and the caricatures are what people believe. And we see that showing up frequently. I think Fu Manchu is of its time, and it, especially in the 20s and 30s, got even worse and got like sort of built into those serials. And so they became even worse than the original, source material. Um, and one of the things that I think is interesting is we're almost all of the people that are on this conversation are not representative of the groups that we are saying, whether they're racist or not. But I think that what's really neat is that we're finding opportunities to promote voices from within the communities that are being discussed, as opposed to, for example, the book James, I think it was a Pulitzer Prize winning novel told from the perspective of slave Jim from Huckleberry Finn. Um, from I think a African American author, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing about it is we actually have source material. Judge D is an example where Judge D, which is an earlier Chinese detective, was written from the perspective of a Chinese author. And so to me, like, look back at Judge D and look at how that detective behaved, and you won't be entertained by the fact that he's an evil, long mustachio twirling, caricature, but you'll be entertained more by the society in which he lived and the social mores and social structures that we are just not familiar with anymore. So I guess my pushback on the assertion that it's important to center characters like Fu Manchu is more, I see where you're going with it, but I think it's more that the caricature of us and the stereotype of a set of people, which Fu Manchu is,
Right.
Is the problem. It's not that racism can't be discussed. It's just that we're starting from a place of like, this is a white author writing about a society he didn't really know or understand.
Which I don't think matters, honestly.
I disagree, but that's
Yeah.
fine. We can disagree too.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I don't think it matters. What I do is I try to reflect canonical Sherlock Holmes. And I think that I have done that.
And I'm not criticizing you in any way, by the way. I think it's great that there are
hear
more.
That, but I don't like the proposition. In my Natalie McMaster's books, there's a lot of LGBTQ stuff, and I'm as straight as they come. And I have spent a lot of time in cons talking to gay and lesbian people about me as a straight author writing about them. And the thing that I heard the most from them was, no matter what you do, portray us as people.
And being respectful. I think that's important, And I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm just saying I think it's great that we're now hearing from the communities themselves, like that there are LGBT authors, there are straight authors that are writing LGBT characters, and it doesn't have to be a racist portrayal or a, whatever you want to call it, biased portrayal. I think that it's just good to discuss it, period. And I think you're right that having more representation is better, period. But having accurate representation, I think, is the gold standard.
But I don't want all of these attitudes to prevent me as an author from writing about biased characters. And that's something.
That's not the same thing.
That's
something I agree with you.
Into all the time.
Yeah.
Is, if I have a particularly bad person who, let's pick gay for an example. It can be anything.
Sure.
Chinese, gay, black, pick one. But, I'm writing about the character. The character is bad. The character is evil. The character is a sociopath, which doesn't have anything to do with his race, sexual orientation, or any of that. It's just a bad person. But sometimes the sensitivity is that, well, you shouldn't do that because this person is from a protected class. And worse yet, sir, you're not a member of that class.
Right.
And, I'm a 72-year-old white guy who pretty much does what he wants to now.
Sure.
So
Well,
I spent a lot of
you're
time.
absolutely right in my in my opinion that you can write a character who is evil, but is not portrayed as a sloppy stereotype. Like, and I think that that's the distinction that I think you and I both agree on
Yeah. The
is
problem
that.
is that people are always telling me, there's a Natalie McMaster's is contemporary, and there's a lot of political stuff in the books too. And people keep trying to tell me what my politics are, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
And you won't,
No,
and
and
you won't if you
I
read
hear
the
you.
book. But
Yeah, and
they
that's not
always
what I'm not
the
saying that at all,
authors,
but I think you
the
asserted
author is what the
a
author
different
is.
argument.
Yeah.
You can't write racism. No, that's not true. Like we write racism all the time, like and we encounter it all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if your character is true to a portrayal, like a historical portrayal, then you're out of danger in the realm that I'm talking about. It's when you start just saying like because they are, let's say Catholic, that they're evil because
Yes.
they are beholden to the Pope's whims, or that
Yes.
they are, they're again Jewish is the stereotype that's being brought up in the chat. That because they're Jewish, they can't be trusted, or they're going to stab you in the back. Like this is the Dickensian trope, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
oh, what's his face?
And I may even have a
Yeah.
character in a given book that says that if
Hmm.
the character believes it. But again, I'm not the character. I'm just
Right.
portraying the character.
Hmm.
And
And those are different. Those are
I know,
very different things.
yeah.
And you're right. There's a reactionary movement that I think is also probably harmful to creativity that says you can't even do it if
Mm-hmm.
you can't use a character that is of a race that's not your own, let's say.
If you read my Addleton tragedy story, I want you to cringe. I do. Because some of the stuff in there about the way blacks were treated in England and in the United States is definitely cringeworthy. But the point is that the people at the time believed it. And
Hmm.
that's the thing that's cringeworthy. And that's the thing I'm trying to show.
Right. Yeah,
All right,
I hear
guys. We are actually out of time. This has been a much deeper discussion than I expected, which is really good. I think this has been a very delightful and very excellent conversation, and welcome to continue it at another time or via email. But thank you all for coming. This has been delightful, and we're just out of time, unfortunately. So yeah, another round of applause. Thank you, Walter, for reminding me for Tom and just for everybody here. This has been a really, really great discussion, went in directions I did not expect. I will send a follow-up as I always do with a link to the meeting because a number of people had other things going on today who did want to participate. You feel free to reach out to Tom. He just put his email in there, particularly if you want to find out more about his other books. Because like I said, he's an award-winning author, and we're always delighted to have you on, Tom.
Thank you for asking, Derek.
Yep, you got it. And next month, we will have Sherlock Mondays will be giving a presentation. Ed from Sherlock Mondays will talk about the podcast, and then we'll take our hiatus. But when we come back in August, Bruce Harris is going to give a talk about chronologizing Holmes and his chronology book. So that's what we've got on the docket coming up for the next few months. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for our new members. And you are all always welcome. And if you are ever interested in just giving a talk or being a guest, let me know. All right. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful spring. Okay. I'll see you in May.
Thank you.
Thank you.